There have been a lot of deletions lately. The Telegraph put this up a couple of days ago. COVID-19 booster jab offer set to end. Government is also preparing to wind down the open offer of the first 2 doses over the coming months due to dwindling uptake. Vaccine negative, winding down the vaccines. And it vanished, to be replaced with this. COVID booster jabs for elderly to continue this year. Government also prepares to launch emergency surge vaccinations if novel variant of sufficient concern emerges. The Telegraph scrubbed the earlier article and replaced it with another, basically saying exactly the same thing, while saying the exact opposite. We will agree, I think, that to end is the opposite of to continue, and to wind down the opposite of to launch. And yet the second one is the first one repackaged. The same article, the same web address, different emphases, different wording. The Telegraph, it turns out, came under pressure for its Funeral of the Vaccines article, and rejigged it and reissued it with the vaccines now raring to go. If you look at that address, you'll get the rejigged version, but if you put it in the Wayback Machine, you'll get something like that, which will yield the Vaccine Funeral original version. Can't hide from the archive. Then there was this, which came out in the Mail a couple of days ago. Why don't we just mutate it ourselves? Director of Research at Pfizer reveals in undercover footage firm is exploring manipulating COVID to make it more potent by infecting monkeys to create new vaccines. This report on an expose from Project Veritas of Pfizer's apparent plans for supercharging viruses was then deleted. Last I checked, that URL yields this page, not quite the same. Project Veritas uploaded their video to YouTube, where it got a pathetic 500,000 views. That really is very small in comparison to what you'd have expected, so YouTube basically buried it with the algorithm. But then they deleted it completely. That's what you get if you go to the original address now. That video is available on Twitter and on other platforms, and on Twitter it had just short of 22 million views yesterday. Since YouTube deleted it, I cannot play it, but I can quote from it. The excited boy who is centre stage is Jordan Walker, Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations and mRNA Scientific Planning for Pfizer. Talking here about virus mutations, I've highlighted some of the things he says which describe current events actually happening and not just something hypothetical. It depends on how the experiments work out, because this is something we're trying. We're not supposed to do gain-of-function research with viruses. We do these selected structure mutations to try to see if we can make them more potent. There is research ongoing about that. They're still conducting the experiments on it, but it seems from what I've heard they're optimizing it, but they're going slow because everyone's very cautious. He also says that he believes that COVID came from the Wuhan lab because nothing else makes any sense. What a shock! And that COVID is an absolute cash cow for Pfizer. And after the absolute internet shitstorm that exploded as a consequence of this, Pfizer finally responded. Pfizer responds to research claims. Allegations have recently been made related to gain-of-function and directed evolution research at Pfizer, and the company would like to set the record straight. In the ongoing development of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine, Pfizer has not conducted gain-of-function or directed evolution research. With a naturally evolving virus, it is important to routinely assess the activity of an antiviral. Most of this work is conducted using computer simulations or mutations of the main protease, a non-infectious part of the virus. In a limited number of cases, when a full virus does not contain any known gain-of-function mutations, such a virus may be engineered to enable the assessment of antiviral activity in cells. It is important to note that these studies are required by US and global regulators for all antiviral products and are carried out by many companies and academic institutions in the US and around the world. So the main takeaways here are that this statement that in a limited number of cases when a full virus does not contain any known gain-of-function mutations, such virus may be engineered to enable the assessment of antiviral activity in cells seems to contradict the statement at the top. Pfizer has not conducted gain-of-function or directed evolution research, but they then say it is important to note that these studies are required by US and global regulators for all antiviral products and are carried out by many companies and academic institutions in the US and around the world. So on the one hand, Pfizer seems to contradict their statement, we don't do gain-of-function experiments, but on the other hand they seem to give a perfectly plausible explanation for this, that they're required by the regulators, and they also say everybody else does them anyway. We shouldn't forget that regulators are never independent of the thing they regulate, because for one thing they depend on them for their job, and for another thing, as this bloke says in the Project Veritas video, and as we know anyway, there's a revolving door between regulators and the regulated entity, because the regulators tend to, once they finish in government, go into employment with the thing they were regulating, and so as regulators they don't want to upset them and potentially jeopardize their future employment. So on the face of it at least, what seems to be an acknowledgement of dangerous virus-boosting experiments, and in contradiction to what they said previously, is softened somewhat by the justification they give. I suspect, I have to say, not too much will come of this. I had a look yesterday to see if Robert Malone had made any comment, and he had written a Substack article which didn't really say anything particularly substantive in terms of what Pfizer had said, and he concluded his remarks with things about Nuremberg trials and hang them high, which is all very stereotypical of the anti-vax right, or very cartoonish, but not really what you expect of a serious scientist. So I have to say I don't think this will amount to very much. The anti-vaxxers, the Bill Gates vaccine genocide depopulation crew, and the slightly more discerning anti-COVID vaxxers will say this is evidence of Pfizer malfeasance, and the pro-COVID vaccine crew will all say there's nothing whatsoever to see here, as per the statement which Pfizer have issued, and the theatre will continue. This did occur to me, and I know it occurred to an awful lot of people. This bloke, Jordan Walker, is Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations and mRNA Scientific Planning. He is clearly a high-ranking Pfizer official. And here he is trying to explain what he said by saying, like any normal person, you lie to impress a date. Well, that may be true in his neck of the woods, but is that really an attitude you want to see being displayed by somebody who is involved at a high level developing crucial vaccines which are going to be rolled out to the entire world? And here he's getting hysterical, and he ends up on the floor trying to get hold of the crew's equipment, then goes outside and tries to block the passage of a car he thinks contains his tormentors. The police show up and they say that if he'd still been there, because at that point he'd legged it, he would have been arrested himself. He's a high-ranking member of the people behind the COVID vaccine, even taking into account his obvious extreme distress. And how can you not feel sorry for him when he says, "How will I ever trust anyone again?" How can you not feel sorry for that? If you took the COVID vaccine, are you as happy now about that decision as you were previously? Now you know something about the quality of the people behind that vaccine. I would be curious to know.